The Vatican has long been a place where power and tradition blend, creating an atmosphere of closely guarded secrets. Now, a different feeling permeates the air. A heavy silence fills the halls of the Holy See. The world observes Pope Francis' every move, while rumors spread quickly. Something is happening, and no one seems willing to reveal the full truth. Could it be simply the natural progression of age? A body that no longer functions as it once did? Or is there something being carefully concealed from public view? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In recent months, the Pope's health has become a frequent topic. Small details that were previously overlooked are now being closely examined. The man who has always been a symbol of strength and determination in the face of the Church's challenges now displays clear signs of weariness. For some, it is an inevitable natural process, but for others, something larger is unfolding behind the scenes, something that could alter the future of the Catholic Church permanently. This is not the first time a pope has faced health issues while holding the throne of Peter. History is filled with examples of church leaders who continued despite the Church's challenges. Faced with physical frailty, John Paul I, in his final years, faced illness with resolve, leaving no room for doubt about his continuation. However, times have changed, pressures are different, and the secrets surrounding the Vatican have never been so dense. What makes everything even more intriguing is the way information has been carefully managed. The Vatican asserts that Francis is well, receiving the best care. To what extent is the Church prepared to deal with a possible absence of its leader? And if Francis' departure is more than a health issue? If something is happening behind the scenes, something that cannot be revealed publicly? The possibility of a resignation no longer seems so remote. But would this be a decision made solely because of his declining health? Or would other forces be at play, pushing for a change that few dare to discuss? If Francis were to leave the papacy, who do you think his successor could be? Should the Church pursue a more modern or more traditional path? Furthermore, another element adds to the intrigue of this situation. Since ancient times, many prophecies have indicated a period of transformation within the Catholic Church. Malachi, a well-known prophet, left predictions in this context that align remarkably well with the current moment. According to his words, Francis may be the last pope before a major change, but change for what? For whom? While the world awaits answers, time progresses, but with each new day, uncertainty grows, and one thing is clear: the fate of the Catholic Church has never been so shrouded in mystery. What awaits us in the future? Could Francis be the central figure in a transition that has not yet been announced, or will his tenure extend to the limits of his endurance? These questions echo through the halls of the Vatican among cardinal bishops and the faithful. With each appearance of the Pope, the eyes of the world turn to him, seeking clues. But are we prepared to hear the answer? In the following sections, we will delve further into this enigma. We will analyze the initial signs of this change behind the scenes of a Vatican that never reveals all it knows, and the impact that a possible transition could have inside and outside the church. Regardless of the outcome, one thing is certain: we are living in a historic moment, and perhaps we are closer to the end of an era than we realize. If this truly represents a significant shift for the Catholic Church, what might unfold in the coming years? The decline of a leader rarely happens suddenly. Subtle signs begin to emerge, often unnoticed at first, but over time they become impossible to overlook. Pope Francis was no exception. Early indications of his vulnerability went unnoticed by many, hidden by his unwavering dedication to the Church and his charismatic approach to addressing challenges. However, for those paying close attention, something unusual was already taking shape. His public appearances started to shift. The man who once moved with energy now required assistance. His steps grew shorter and more hesitant. Brief pauses began to appear in his speeches. At times, his voice seemed weaker, and he appeared to struggle for breath. Could this simply be a natural part of aging? There was some speculation. Official reports consistently reassured that Francis was in good health, under the care of highly skilled specialists. Yet, the images told a different story. During official events, the Pope began using a wheelchair on occasion, a notable change for a leader who had always emphasized strength. Moments of fatigue became more apparent, and the need for support to move around grew increasingly frequent. The first concrete signs of concern emerged years ago. In 2015, a surgery revealed that part of one of his lungs had been removed, a detail that has worried medical professionals ever since. Francis has been closely monitored while maintaining his demanding schedule, but now the passage of time seems to be taking its toll. In one of his recent speeches, the Pope had to pause due to breathing difficulties. The interruption was brief, but significant. Is the Vatican withholding information about the Pope's health, or is this all mere speculation? Questions have begun to arise among the faithful and experts alike. How long can he sustain such an exhausting routine? And if his condition is more serious than the Vatican is willing to acknowledge, what might that mean? There are indications that his health could be in a more critical state than previously thought. Medical experts suggest that symptoms like those observed in Francis could be linked to chronic respiratory issues, or even heart complications. However, official statements remain vague. The Vatican maintains its reserved approach, sharing only minimal details about his condition. This strategy, rather than easing concerns, has only fueled further speculation. What is known is that the world has yet to uncover the full truth. One certainty is that Francis' leadership has never been characterized by silence. Since becoming Pope, he has brought a spirit of renewal, challenging traditions and modernizing the Church's message. Yet, his presence has become increasingly limited. What does this mean for the future of Catholicism? His followers watch with concern, while the cardinals observe attentively. With each new appearance, the mystery deepens. Will he be able to continue leading the Church, or are we witnessing the final stages of his papacy? In the chapters to come, we will explore what is happening behind the scenes at the Vatican, how the Pope's fragility might impact the Church, and what this could mean for the future of the papacy. History teaches us that significant changes and unexpected events often begin with subtle signs. Now, everything suggests that we are in a period of transition. But the question remains, transition to what? Looking back, Pope Francis' health has always been shrouded in a mix of concern and mystery. His strong and determined demeanor, his active posture, and his constant engagement with the public masked a reality that few dared to discuss openly. He has never been a man of unshakable health. From a young age, Francis faced physical challenges that remained largely out of the public eye. The first major warning about Pope Francis' health came in his youth, when part of one of his lungs had to be removed due to a severe respiratory infection. This was a concerning detail, but it was never fully explored. After all, if he managed to ascend to the highest position in the Church, it couldn't be seen as an insurmountable obstacle. However, as the years passed, other health issues began to surface. Reports indicate that he has always required strict medical monitoring, a necessity that only intensified during his papacy. In 2015, a surgery drew global attention. Officially described as a routine procedure, it raised questions among specialists. For a man with a history of lung complications, any medical intervention could have long-term consequences. In recent years, however, the situation has shifted more dramatically. Reports suggest increasing respiratory difficulties, and recent images of Francis leave little doubt. He is not the same. His voice, once a source of firmness and authority, has lost some of its strength, and his public appearances have become increasingly rare. Yet, the larger question isn't just about his physical health, it's about the impact this could have on the leadership of the Church. History shows that popes in declining health have often created internal challenges for the Vatican. For example, John Paul II spent his final years visibly battling Parkinson's disease, a period during which many critical decisions were made by those closest to him. Francis, however, has always been different. He has consistently insisted on maintaining control and steering every situation himself. Now, the question is whether he will accept the limitations his body is imposing on him. Within the Vatican's corridors, a quiet but growing discussion is taking shape. Is it sustainable for a weakened pope to remain in his position? How long can the Church endure this uncertainty? If his health continues to decline, the pressure for a definitive decision will only increase. But will that decision come from Francis himself, or will it be imposed by external forces? The answer may be closer than we think. In the chapters to come, we will explore how the Vatican is navigating this delicate situation, and what possibilities lie ahead for the future of the papacy. After all, when a leader begins to falter, the world starts preparing for what comes next, and in this case, what comes next could reshape the Church forever. The Vatican is an institution built on control. Nothing leaks without authorization, and nothing is said without purpose. What reaches the public is carefully calculated. But when the truth begins to slip through the cracks, when the health of Pope Francis becomes a global concern, the Vatican's stance grows even more enigmatic. Official statements remain vague. The Pope is fine, they say. But what does that mean when videos show a visibly weakened man struggling to walk, breathe, and speak? If the intention was to reassure, the effect has been the opposite. Silence breeds more doubt than certainty. This is because, historically, the Vatican has never handled transparency well when it comes to the health of a pope. John Paul II, in his final years, was clearly unable to lead, yet the Holy See kept his condition hidden until his death was inevitable. Benedict XVI, on the other hand, made the unprecedented decision to resign, a move that was only fully understood with time and still raises questions today. What is the Vatican afraid of by not releasing clear information about Francis? Are they trying to maintain stability, avoid speculation, or is there something they cannot yet reveal? Behind the sacred walls, the Pope is surrounded by doctors, advisors, and cardinals who know more than they are willing to share. Decisions are being made away from the public eye. If Francis can no longer fully carry out his duties, who will be ready to step in? Internal sources suggest that discussions about a potential successor have already begun, unofficially, of course. But in the corridors of power, no one can afford to be caught off guard. If preparations are underway, it may mean that Francis' departure is closer than we realize. The question remains, will his departure be voluntary, or will there be internal pressure for him to step down? History reminds us that the Church, despite its spiritual mission, is also a stage for intense political maneuvering. Not everyone within the Vatican agrees with the reforms Francis has sought to implement. Some may see his potential resignation as an opportunity to reverse many of his decisions. This only adds to the growing uncertainty. As the world watches, the Vatican faces a pivotal moment, one that could redefine the future of the Catholic Church. The Vatican's silence is not accidental. It serves to protect, but it also conceals. The question is, what is truly happening behind the scenes? And, more importantly, when the truth finally emerges, will it be too late to react? In the chapters to come, we will explore the impact this uncertainty may have on the future of the Church. If Francis is indeed approaching the end of his papacy, what does this mean for Catholics worldwide? Who is quietly preparing behind the scenes to assume one of the most powerful positions on earth? The history of the Catholic Church is not solely shaped by doctrines and traditions. Among its more obscure records lies something many avoid discussing: Prophecies. When it comes to the future of the papacy, an ancient prediction resurfaces, casting an unsettling shadow over Francis' reign. Saint Malachy, an 11th century Irish bishop, is said to have received visions of all the popes who would lead the Church until the end of time. According to his prophecy, Francis would be the penultimate pope. After him would come Peter the Roman, a leader who would face times of destruction and tribulation before the eventual collapse of the Church. For centuries, this prediction was treated as a curiosity, something distant and lacking immediate relevance. But now, with Francis' health declining and the possibility of his resignation becoming a frequent topic of discussion, the alarm bells are ringing. Are we nearing that moment? Saint Malachi's prophecy is not the only one. Saint Bridget of Sweden, a 10th century mystic, also had visions of a fragile pope who would guide the Church through times of chaos and uncertainty. Francis fits this description remarkably well. He assumed the papacy during a crisis of credibility within the Church, faced internal resistance, and sought to modernize the institution in unprecedented ways. But was his role always meant to pave the way for something greater, and perhaps darker? Looking at recent events, it's hard to ignore the signs. The Vatican is increasingly divided between progressives and conservatives. Society is growing more distant from the Church's traditional doctrines, and now its highest leader is visibly vulnerable. His future is uncertain, and his ability to continue is in question. Many dismiss these prophecies as mere coincidence, but the alignment of events gives even the most skeptical pause. Is this just another challenging phase in the long history of Catholicism, or are we witnessing the beginning of an irreversible transformation? The answer remains unclear. But one thing is certain: every decision made in the coming months could define the future of the Catholic Church. In the next chapters, we will delve deeper into the potential impact of this transition. If Francis is indeed the penultimate pope, what will happen to the Church after him? Who is poised to assume this immense responsibility? And, above all, will the Catholic Church emerge from this crisis intact, or will it undergo a transformation that alters its course forever? Words can be measured, and communications can be carefully crafted, but images never lie. And the images of Pope Francis speak volumes. In the past, he moved through crowds with energy, held children in his arms, and walked long distances during public events. Today, the reality is different. His steps are uncertain, his body no longer responds with the same strength, and he has been seen using a wheelchair or requiring support to move. His breathing appears labored, and his expression increasingly reflects fatigue. The transition has been gradual, almost imperceptible to those not paying close attention. But now, the picture is impossible to ignore. The man who once embodied an active and determined leadership now carries the weight of a body that can no longer sustain the same mission with the same vigor. As the world watches, the Vatican faces a pivotal moment, one that could redefine the future of the Catholic Church. The decisions made in the coming months will not only determine the direction of the papacy, but may also shape the legacy of an institution that has stood for centuries. The question remains, what comes next? Specific moments have raised significant concerns. During one of his most recent public appearances, Francis struggled to hide the effort it took to remain standing. His gaze revealed exhaustion, and his expression seemed different, as though something vital was fading. This visible decline has sparked unease both inside and outside the Vatican. The world is witnessing a pope who, despite his unwavering faith, is physically weakening. But the central question goes beyond his health. How long can he continue to bear this immense responsibility? History offers a sobering reminder of what happens when a pope remains in office despite his limitations. John Paul II stayed in his role until his final days, even when he could no longer speak or move independently. His frail and ailing image became a symbol of resilience, but it also served as a reminder that the Church does not always know when to make difficult decisions. Now, with Francis, the same dilemma resurfaces. Should he step down before his condition worsens? Or should he continue to lead until he reaches the limits of his strength? What sets Francis apart from his predecessors is his willingness to embrace change. From the beginning of his papacy, he has broken traditions, challenged entrenched structures, and faced opposition from conservative factions within the Vatican. The possibility of his resignation does not seem as far-fetched as it once might have. But if he does step down, what comes next? In the chapters to come, we will explore the behind-the-scenes movements within the Vatican, the secret discussions, and the conversations already underway about a potential succession. Is the Church prepared for this transition, or could this moment trigger an even deeper crisis? One thing is certain: the world is watching Francis closely, and each new public appearance may bring signs that the end of his papacy is nearer than we think. The Vatican has always managed transitions, but none occur without turbulence. This time, the Catholic Church may be facing one of the most significant upheavals in its history. Pope Francis is not just a religious leader, he is the face of a revolution within the Church. Since the start of his pontificate, he has challenged long-held dogmas, taken bold stances on sensitive issues, and sought to align the Catholic faith with contemporary realities. But now, his presence is increasingly limited. What happens when the leader of a millennia-old institution can no longer fulfill his role fully? Behind the scenes, the question of papal succession is no longer just a rumor, it has become an unavoidable topic of discussion. Among cardinals, theologians, and the faithful, the question looms: if Francis steps down, who will take his place? The Church is deeply divided. On one side are those who support his reforms and believe his legacy should continue. On the other is a conservative faction that has never fully embraced his decisions and sees his potential departure as an opportunity to restore a more traditional approach. If Francis resigns, the choice of the next pope will shape the future of the Church. A successor aligned with his vision could solidify the changes he has initiated. But if a more conservative leader is elected, we could see a dramatic reversal of the direction the Church has taken in recent years. However, there is an added layer of complexity to this succession. What if Francis' resignation is not entirely his choice? Rumors suggest that there are forces within the Vatican pressuring him to step down, using his declining health as justification. But could there be more at play? The history of the Church is no stranger to conspiracies, and what appears to be a peaceful transition might actually be the result of intense power struggles within the Vatican's walls. Regardless of the circumstances, one thing is clear: Francis is at a critical juncture in his papacy. He faces two paths: remain in office until his health no longer allows him to govern, or follow in the footsteps of his predecessor, Benedict XVI, and step down before it is too late. Whichever path he chooses, the Catholic Church will be forever changed. In the chapters ahead, we will examine the possible scenarios for this transition. Who are the most likely candidates to assume the papacy? What risks come with such an unexpected shift in leadership? And, most importantly, how will this impact the faithful around the world? The answers to these questions will shape not only the future of the Vatican, but also the legacy of Pope Francis and the direction of the Catholic Church for generations to come. What is about to unfold could be far more significant than a simple change in leadership. It may mark the dawn of a new era for the Catholic Church, or the collapse of the structure as we know it. The world is watching the Vatican closely, and all eyes are on Francis. What will his decision be? Historically, the resignation of a pope has been an exceedingly rare event. For centuries, a pontiff remained in office until his death. But in 2013, Benedict XVI shattered this tradition, citing his declining health as the reason he could no longer lead the Church effectively. Now, Francis finds himself at a similar crossroads. He has always been seen as a strong, determined, and resilient leader, one whose papacy has been defined by action rather than passivity. But what happens when the body can no longer keep pace with the mind? If Francis chooses to follow Benedict XVI's path and resign, his name will go down in history as the second consecutive pope to voluntarily step down from the throne of Peter. This would set a potentially dangerous precedent, or perhaps it would signal a new reality for the papacy, one where the role is no longer necessarily a lifelong commitment. On the other hand, if he decides to remain, he will face even greater challenges. His health already limits his public appearances, and his voice no longer carries the same strength. Will he be able to govern effectively under these constraints? Or will he become an absent pope, leaving cardinals and advisors to wield power behind the scenes? What makes this situation even more complex is that the decision may not be entirely his to make. Rumors from within the Vatican suggest that there are factions within the Church eager to see him step down. Francis' progressive stances have never been universally accepted among the Catholic hierarchy, and some view his physical frailty as an opportune moment to push for a transition. Yet, Francis is not a man easily swayed. If he believes he still has the strength to continue, he will likely resist pressure to resign. However, in this high-stakes game of power, whether he stays or leaves may not depend solely on his will. In the chapters to come, we will delve into the internal dynamics of the Vatican. Who truly wants Francis to step aside? And if he chooses to remain, what will the consequences be? The decisions made in the coming months could define the trajectory of the Church for decades to come. Time is running out, and the Catholic Church appears to be approaching a critical breaking point. What initially seemed like a natural decline in the health of Pope Francis has now become a global impasse. Questions are mounting, and while the Vatican remains silent, there is intense activity behind the scenes. What is being prepared away from the public eye? If Francis resigns, the world will witness an early conclave, a rare event in which cardinals from around the globe will gather to elect the next pope. But this process is far from purely spiritual. It is a political battleground where opposing forces will clash for control over the Church's future. The names being floated as potential successors vary widely. Some are more conservative and may seek to roll back Francis' reforms, while others align with his progressive vision and aim to continue his work. But what if Francis does not resign? What if he chooses to remain in office despite his physical limitations? This scenario could lead to a different kind of crisis, one where the Church is led by a pope whose ability to govern is increasingly questioned. The stakes could not be higher. Every great change in history has been preceded by a moment of crisis, and the Catholic Church now seems to be standing at the edge of such a moment. Whether Francis steps down or stays, his decision, or the decision forced upon him, will have profound implications. It could either solidify his legacy as a transformative leader, or trigger a dramatic shift in the Church's direction. One thing is certain: the world is watching, and the next chapter in the history of the Catholic Church is about to be written. If Pope Francis chooses to resist and remain in office for as long as his body allows, it could lead to an unprecedented scenario. A pope who is increasingly absent, delegating critical responsibilities to close cardinals. This would create a power vacuum within the Church, and history shows that power vacuums inevitably lead to disputes and internal struggles. There is also another possibility, one that few dare to voice openly, but is beginning to be whispered behind closed doors. The Catholic Church may be on the brink of the greatest crisis in its history. The prophecy of Saint Malachi, which foretold that Francis would be the penultimate pope, is starting to feel less like an ancient legend and more like a chilling prediction. According to this vision, after Francis' successor, the Church would face unprecedented tribulations. Could we be nearing that moment? Whatever the outcome, what we are witnessing now is merely the tip of the iceberg. Something profound is shifting, and its impact will be felt globally. In the chapters to come, we will explore the potential scenarios. Who could succeed Francis? What risks does this transition pose? And how might this redefine the Catholic Church forever? Whether we like it or not, we are standing at a pivotal moment, one that could be remembered for centuries. The decisions made in the coming months will shape the future of millions of faithful around the world. The Catholic Church has weathered countless storms throughout history, wars, schisms, and revolutions. Each time, the Vatican has endured. But what lies on the horizon now is not just another challenging phase. It is something fundamentally different, something that could alter the very structure of the Catholic faith. Pope Francis is at the heart of this enigma. His health is declining, his public presence is diminishing, and the Vatican's silence only deepens the uncertainty. We are not merely witnessing the decline of a leader, we are observing a moment that could redefine the Church's trajectory. If Francis resigns, a new pope will be chosen. But who will it be, and, more importantly, what will their mission entail? Will they be a leader committed to continuing the reforms Francis initiated, or will they bow to pressure from conservative factions and reverse years of efforts to modernize the Church? On the other hand, if Francis does not resign and remains in office while growing increasingly frail, we could see a weakened papacy where influential cardinals assume greater decision-making power. This would open the door to internal conflicts, and when power is fragmented, the consequences are often unpredictable. There is also a third, more unsettling scenario, one that few want to consider, but is becoming increasingly plausible. If this is indeed the final great cycle of the Catholic Church, as we know it, Saint Malachi's prophecy suggests that Francis is the penultimate pope, followed by a period of turbulence that could redefine everything. Is this mere superstition, or do current events lend credibility to this view? The modern world is increasingly distancing itself from religious traditions. The Church faces crises of credibility, internal divisions, and a gradual erosion of its influence. The succession of Francis may be the last major event before a profound transformation. What happens in the coming months will be decisive. Regardless of the outcome, the Catholic Church will never be the same again. So, I leave you with this question: are we witnessing merely the end of a papacy, or the beginning of a new era that could change everything? Share your thoughts in the comments, and pass this along to those who are also seeking to understand what lies ahead. We will see you in the next chapter of this unfolding story.